Well, good morning and welcome from Mississippi, from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, actually. Good morning. This is Pastor Ken. Welcome to one Monday morning with Pastor Ken, and we're about 2 hours ahead of you out here in Mississippi. But yeah, what a day yesterday was, and the beginning to this morning. You'll notice the little picture that's associated with this post. It was an interesting wake-up call. So after church yesterday, I boarded a plane for Jackson, Mississippi, by way of Houston. And our last leg into Jackson, we were instructed to stay buckled. And I knew there was some bad weather back here, but stay buckled. In fact, we didn't get our complimentary snacks and soft drink, and because the pilot had the flight attendants buckled in also. There was only one little bump, and that was it. So anyhow, it was a quick flight. Landed in Jackson, Mississippi. It was wet, it was rainy, it was stormy, and it wasn't really super stormy. So drove a couple hours and finally got to bed about 1:15, 1:30, something like that. And you'll see from that picture, about 4:30 this time, Central Time, my phone went off. I got this, just this horrible noise woke me up. What is that? And I hadn't heard anything that was going on, which says a nice thing about the insulation in this motel. I didn't hear anything going on. And by the way, we're not outside today. I would have taken you out to beautiful Mississippi, but it's yucky outside, so I'm staying in here in the room here, talking with you this morning. But anyhow, back to 4:30 this morning. This awful noise coming from my nightstand, and discovered it was an alert. And you'll see in the pictures I mentioned tornado warning. And so once I figured out what was going on, and I went over to the window and pulled the blinds back, and these dark curtains had really cut out all the continuous thunder or lightning. Very little thunder, but continuous lightning. Like every 2 to 3 seconds, a bolt of lightning would light up the sky. All the trees were laying sideways, blowing rain, and I'm going, the only time I've ever seen this is on television, watching a storm watch, or when our daughter Bree was in Memphis for a couple years going to school. We would watch the Weather Channel when they would have a tornado watch. So I just I went back and kind of gathered myself a little bit, grabbed my glasses, put my glasses on, and went outside. Didn't go outside, looked out the window again. It had already started to die down after a couple minutes. So the eye of the storm had reached Hattiesburg, and praise God, there was no tornado touchdown. There were no, not that I know of any funnel clouds, but anyway, it was a great day in the house of God yesterday, Mother's Day. Great skit put on by Sharon and Gabby. Thanks so much for the time they put in for that, but that was really, really good. But then just a wonderful day, and to end like that, a stormy day. The Bible talks about storms, and you even look at the Noah's Ark and how the world was flooded. There was no storm. Just God caused the waters of the deep to let loose. But throughout the Bible, we read about storms. We talked a lot about the storm that Jonah was involved in while he was just before he was swallowed by that great fish. The Apostle Paul was no stranger to a storm. In fact, being shipwrecked, he understood what a storm was out on the sea. Even Jesus, Matthew chapter 8, talks about Jesus being on the Sea of Galilee and encountering a storm, sleeping during the storm until his disciples woke him up, and he calmed the storm with his voice, showing outright his power and his strength as the Son of God. Well, what do we do when there is a storm? So my mind started racing. I'm looking at the window that would a few hours ago was a little bit different. But what do we do when we encounter a storm? I thought of calling the front desk and saying, "Hey, what are we supposed to go? Is there a bomb shelter, a storm shelter somewhere? Are we supposed to go?" And I started remembering, okay, that's right. All those hours that Bree spent in the bathtub in Memphis, in the middle of the building, as close to the middle of the building as you get. So I thought, okay, bathroom's right there, close to the middle of the building. Okay, I should be about as fine as I could be. Stay away from the windows. Oh, that's right. I need to quit looking out the window. So what do we do when we encounter a storm? What kind of shelter do we seek? So I was looking through the Bible a little bit. It's interesting how often the word storm is used. And we look at Ezekiel and Daniel, and they talk about a storm that is coming. And we know, and these are books of prophecy and prophesying of a storm coming. This great conflict between good and evil, God and Satan's forces. In Psalm 55, verse 8, interesting, you pull these little verses out, and you got to really think about them. It says, "I would hasten to my place of refuge from the stormy wind and tempest." All these little short little verses that David brings forth here, and they're precatory prayers, praying for the destruction of his enemies in God's will and in God's way. But I would hasten my place of refuge from the stormy wind and tempest. And he says, "Confuse, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I've seen violence and strife." He said, what do I do? Hasten me to that place of refuge. Proverbs chapter 21. Proverbs chapter 1, not 21. Proverbs chapter 1. So, I said, what do you do? Who do I call? Do I call 911? No, they're aware of what's going on. Do I call the front desk? What do we do when we encounter things like that? Look at verse 27, Proverbs 1:27. "When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you." Now, Solomon's not talking about a storm. They're out there. Buildings were much different back in those days, weren't they? Although Solomon's palace was probably pretty nice. Whether it stand up to a tornado or an earthquake, I couldn't tell you about that. But he's talking about dread coming like a storm, the storms of life that come upon you. He talks about this. In verse 28, he says, Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. Now, who's me? Because, he says, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would not accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. So they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be satisfied with their own devices. See, Solomon's talking about those that did not trust in God, those that did not place their trust and faith in the God of Israel. And they're calling on Solomon for help when dread comes and when bad things happen, but the people have turned their back on God and they're calling on me, but God's not going to hear them because they've rejected him. They've rejected him. So what do we do? How do we handle this? Go to the book of Psalms, and I'm just going to read you some verses from the book of Psalm, and I hope that these encourage you today. I don't know what your dread or calamity or your storm is today. It could be it's the middle of the month, and the first of the month is coming, and you have a bill due that you just don't know if you're going to be able to pay. That's a storm that you can see on the horizon. It's coming. What do we do? What do we do when a loved one gets some horrible news and they call you up and share with you, hey, I've got cancer, and it's stage 3. A storm is coming. What do you do? Psalm 5, and I read from Psalm 5 the first 3 verses on Sunday, yesterday, and one of my favorite books in the book of Psalm, chapters, I should say. But listen what it says in verse 11. But let all who take refuge in you, that's God, be glad. Let them ever sing for joy, and may you shelter them, that those who love your name may exult in you. For it is you, verse 12, who blesses the righteous man, O Lord. You surround him with favor as with a shield. So the first step is to love the Lord. Love him. Praise his name. Be the righteous man. Because God's going to bless you for that. Now, does that mean I'm going to be the righteous man and all of a sudden my bank account's going to explode? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying God is calling us to bless him, to worship him, to love his name, to extol him, exalt him. That means to raise him up, to put him in a higher place. Psalm 18. So anyway, you take in refuge in him by preparation, by loving him and by praising him, exalting him. Over to Psalm 18. Just a few chapters over. Psalm 18. Let me look at verse 1. And I'm really keying on this word refuge because when there's a storm, we're going to seek some refuge. We're going to seek some shelter. So you could probably use the word shelter in the place of the word refuge. In fact, whatever translation you may be using, that may be what it shows up in your Bible. Here's what it says, Psalm 18:1. I love you, Lord. I love you, O Lord, my strength. This starts right there. I love you, O Lord. So David is saying, I love you, Lord. He's loving the Lord, right? Verse 2, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Let me stop right there. Where does he place his faith and trust? It's in God. Because that's where his salvation comes from. It comes from God. It's not in superstructure. It's not in the riches that he had. It wasn't in the fame that he had. It wasn't in the military prowess that Israel had at that time. He places his faith, he places his refuge in the horn of my salvation. It's a stronghold. Verse 3, I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, for I am saved from my enemies. He calls on the Lord. When he encounters these storms of life, he called on the Lord. Chapter 46. I'm going on a little longer this morning. I thought I'd give you a short little devotional, and here we go, looking at all these wonderful verses in the book of Psalm. Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength and a very present help in trouble. There's that verse. We say that all the time, right? But what does it say in verse 2? Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though its mountains shake at its swelling pride, and although the winds blow and the trees snap over, and I will not fear. I will not fear. It's when we see those storms of life coming, even real life storms of life coming, we shouldn't fear. Place our refuge and strength in God, not in ourselves, but in God. That's what I think this is telling us: is a place our faith and refuge in God. Look at all these things. We talk about the earth changing, the mountains slipping. We're talking about earthquakes. Waters roar and foam. We're talking about floods. The mountains quake. We're talking about volcanoes. All these things, God is in control of these things. God made these things. So we should place our faith and trust in him. Hey, now over to chapter 61. I'll finish there. Chapter 61. Okay. Anytime here. All right. Let's start with verse 1. Psalm 61. Hear my cry, O God, give heed to my prayer. Okay, so the first thing David is doing, he's going to God in prayer. Okay, let's just establish that. I really was going to read to you verses 2 through 4, but I start there at verse 1 because he says, go to God in prayer, okay? Verse 2, from the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a refuge for me, a tower of strength against the enemy. Let me dwell in your tent forever, and let me take refuge in the shelter of your wings. Where does David turn? He turns to God in prayer, and he prays. First of all, praise to God, and recognizes that he's not worthy. My heart is faint. I look at you for my strength, for my refuge, to the rock that is higher than mine, a tower of strength. And they had towers back in those Old Testament days. A tower was erected so you could see your enemy coming, and that was strength. And also a high point for archers and such. It was strength. It was a matter of strength, and you saw it would seek refuge there. So let me wrap this up. I keep saying it over and over again, but when you see the storm approaching, whether it's actually a physical weather meteorology, that type of a storm, and that can be pretty fearful. I think if I was more awake, I probably would have been more fearful, but I was so tired. I don't know what. Maybe I didn't even know what was going on. Maybe I was kind of in a haze. But when we have fear, we shouldn't. We shouldn't have fear, because God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in a time of trouble. So as we encounter those troubles today, hey, it's Mondays. You know what they say about Monday. Oh, it's Monday. There's going to be trouble. There's going to be trials. There's going to be temptations. There's going to be those storms of life that come along. But seek refuge in the Lord. Seek refuge in His storm shelter, or whatever you want to call it, the root shelter, the storm shelter. Seek refuge in God and what He can do to protect you and to lift you up. Still, you may have to go through that storm, though. It's not like, hey, remove me from the storm, take the storm away. The storms in life are to make us stronger. And so when we seek refuge in God, He's teaching us to rely upon Him and become more like Jesus. Thanks for being with me this morning. I apologize for not being outside in the beautiful surrounding area here, but it's just a little wet and windy and not really pleasant outside. And it's probably hot and muggy, and you don't want to see me sweat. So anyway, so we're just hanging out here. Thanks so much for joining me. Hey, this week I am away, so if you need something, make sure you call the church office, and they have ways of reaching out to me if necessary. We still have Trail Life and Heritage Girls on Tuesdays, our Tuesday morning women's Bible study. Wednesday, Awana, Cap City Crew, Praise Team. Thursday, Crafty Ladies. Still all the things going on in our church. It's just wonderful. Our church is so busy, things going on. There will not be Wednesday Word tonight. I'm back here and taking this week off, maybe probably this week and next week, as it turns out, before we start a new study. We finished up our last study looking at the book, The Knowledge of the Holy. This Sunday we'll be back in 1 Timothy again, beginning chapter 2. I look forward to cracking open chapter 2. It's going to be a great chapter to look at. I'm sure some of you are already reading ahead, wondering, I wonder what we're going to do there. Well, you'll just have to come and find out. As I said, it was just a great time in the house of the Lord this past Sunday. I look forward to seeing and being with all of you again this Sunday, and having a safe, hopefully a safe time here, and a safe trip back to the West Coast later on in the week. Once again, thanks for joining me, and God bless you, and have just a wonderful day in the Lord. And just be safe, and when you run into those storms of life, just seek refuge in the Savior. Open up that prayer line between you and God. All right? God bless you, and have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you soon.